Power. When we hear the word, we think of power in the world around us. People in power, powerful systems, the power of nature. What we don't realize is power is us. It's personal, passionate, and full of possibilities. This is Nicole Devlin, host of From the Nth Power podcast, a business and life coaching podcast that helps stuck, intelligent, overthinking mid-career professionals find powerful and purposeful work, giving you the freedom to live your most successful life. You have the power to love what you do, which starts by creating professional and personal growth alignment that will propel your life forward. Not creating this correlation leads to being stuck and unhappy, no matter how much you achieve. From the Nth Power is a new business foundation around your power and values. With a focus on self-actualization, Nicole will help you enhance your career or grow your business, creating a vocation that gives you the confidence and leadership to become whoever you desire. Okay, well, hello, everybody. This is Nicole Devlin, and this is the From the Nth Power podcast, where we talk about power. Personal power is something that you can find and grow from the inside out. And I love having conversations of all different kinds with all different sorts of people, trying to find ways to grow that power through faith, through healing, through love, through anything, any experience, any story that you have, that you want to tell. And the whole sole purpose is to change dynamics socially and out there by bringing the focus of power back to oneself, how one feels and what one wants to project, manifest, or even experience in their own lives and within their own community. So today we're going to talk to Scotte Burns, and Scotte Burns is an amazing person talking about how we create unity across cultures around love. And he talks about science, he talks about faith, he tells stories, and he's quite dynamic. So let me go ahead and turn it over to Scotte and have him introduce himself, and then we'll get into the meat of the podcast. Go ahead, Scotte.
Gosh, I almost want to meet me now after you said all that. Sounds so interesting. So yeah, usually where I start is the most common question people ask us when they ask us about our work. Our project is called Journeys to Love. Mm-hmm. My wife and I started it in 2014, and it started, frankly, as kind of a romantic, borderline vanity project. You know, I was nearing retirement from teaching, and my wife was mid-career, and my MFA is in creative writing, and so I thought, well, you know, I'll hit the road for a while on the bikes because we're avid motorcyclists, and I'll go out and write a book about what it's like to be a man in America today. It was going to call Be a Man. And but then, you know, after 40 years of being in the music business together, we were Renaissance Festival performers. We've done all these things together. I really didn't want to do that alone. And so when I asked her, you know, what would you do if we were going to go out and write a book? Well, her idea was, as we've gotten older, all these businesses, these businesses and interests that we've had, people had started to ask us this recurring question, you know, what's your secret? You know, we've been married 40 years. We've known each other since junior high. People kept asking us, well, what's your secret? Like, we're qualified to tell people, here's how you live your life and go love people. Well, we're not. But I thought, you know, after all the places we've traveled and the things that we've seen across the country, we knew who was qualified to answer that question. It was the people all over the country. And so we decided we'd hit the road for 3 months. And we would talk to as many diverse people and places and cultures and lifestyles and events. And you know, we just tried to get as broad a spectrum as we could on that question. What we didn't understand was really what we were asking people is, no, what's the secret of love? First stop we went to, and if you want that story, I'll tell you, but the first stop we went to, we found out what a stupid question that is. Mm-hmm. Because your secret depends on what your question is, and everybody's questions are different. Mm-hmm. And so what we were really asking is, what is love? Nikki, there's this profound sense of loneliness and disconnect with most people that we came across in the country. And when we tell them these stories, they light up.
Well, love can be different things in different forms, like towards animals, towards communities, towards self, right? And in the world at large. And then I connected with this like idea that before people tell their story of love, which is kind of an aspect of self-intimacy, they want yours first in an affirmative kind of permissive way. But then again, at the same time, there's all this notion that like, do I have the right kind of love, or what is love? And so I'm deeply ingrained in the answer to the question, but yet the love itself is somewhat emotive, I think, in the forefront of most people's minds, but not. But right, but I'm sure you'll get to that in a second. So there's all these different pieces, but fundamentally, what I hear that people are seeking is connection. And that I hear that what you do is you tell stories to create those connections between one person's story and another person's story, which in effect, if I listen to your story and I can relate, it connects me back to my own story and also to my own sense of love, even if I can't answer that question. Say more about that in terms of maybe some things you found about the differences of love, how people answer the question.
That's a perfect segue into what happened after, because in 2020, of course, you, me, everybody, the world ended. And, everything changed when COVID hit. It snow globed everybody's existence. And so we came off the road, and that gave me a couple of years to write the book that was based on our journeys and the stories. And the research for that book took me into studies of love with people that I had never anticipated before. People from neuroscientists to quantum physicists, people in animal behavior. And faith leaders, following up with them, people that we had met across the country. And it occurred to me that if we're really going to boil down, get to the meat of that answer that you're looking for, what is this thing? What we have to find are the commonalities. What is it that the faith leaders and the philosophers and the neuroscientists and the lay people and everyone in all these different cultures and places and fields can agree on? And in the writing of the book, it came down to what we call four understandings. There are four key things that we discovered about love that ultimately everybody agrees on. Sometimes you have to point out to them what their agreement is, because a couple of them are very much counterintuitive. And the most important one, and I didn't mean any disrespect, but the most important one is the reason I was shaking my head is one of the most common error that people make about love is believing that it's an emotion.
Yeah.
That love is an emotion, that it's something we feel, it's something we do. It's not. And I can prove that pretty conclusively through stories and through these comparisons that we've made through all these different fields. Love is a state of being. It's a way, it's a part of our essential consciousness. It's a part of the way we are. Think about it like your sense of humor or a sense of curiosity. You find a lot of different things funny.
Yeah.
and you might have, people have different sorts of senses of humor, but you have a sense of humor.
Yes.
How it makes you feel, you can interpret that as being different kinds of funny. Well, the reason that we misinterpret love as an emotion is because it makes us feel all these profound, deep things. Sometimes they're just enjoyment. That's a very mild form of love. I love ice cream. Sometimes the profound, life-changing, essential things. I love my wife. Those are different things, but they're all sensed with that same basic characteristic, that thing within us that we call love. And it's the unity of that, proving the unity of that to people, that's kind of part of the essence of what we do. How do we know, love is, how do we know it exists? And basically, how do you know something's funny?
Right.
And she goes, well, you just do. I said, I know. That's because you have that sense. In fact, the TED talk that I gave, I don't know if you saw my TED talk. I use the metaphor of senses as love, because your senses are part of your overall, not really your consciousness, but your overall person. You don't have, every time you see something different, you don't think you have a different sense of sight.
Right.
You just know that you're interpreting something differently. So love is often the same way. Your sense of humor, you find things funny because you have that. You feel compassion and romance and duty and all the different trust and all the different things that people interpret and tell us. They try to define love as these things. They confuse it that it is those things, when actually it's love that's letting them sense those things. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And so it actually leads me to something else that I think about a lot. Going back to this idea of like, we're divided, we're separate. in my mind, from what you're saying, part of that is because how we express love or perceive love is different. So if in fact that's true, the question is that, like, what does love mean to bringing us back from being disconnected? Because we have perceptions that are different about what it means to love and be loved and be loving.
Right. Okay. There's going to be no quick answer for this.
Yeah.
It's going to have to be, this kind of understanding is going to be a generational change. But I can tell you from what we have found, and this actually gets into one of our other points, one of the 4 understandings that we have. Love is, you're asking how to get people to understand this. That's exactly what we're trying to do with this work. But it's so far removed from the social and sort of historical understanding of love, it's going to be a difficult thing for most people to understand. But the unity of love is provable. And I'll tell you, in as much of a nutshell as I can, is why I had to write a book about this.
Yeah.
Everything, we were interviewing a Buddhist monk at a Tibetan Buddhist monastery above Woodstock, New York. Nick, you want to have the most perfect hippie moment in your life? Interview a Tibetan Buddhist monk sitting at the top of the temple stairs at a monastery above Woodstock,
right,
singing Michael Jackson songs.
Right.
Perfect hippie moment. But Khenpo Karma Tenkyang, who was the monk that we were talking to, when we asked him to answer that question for us, he said, love is one. And I thought at the time, that's a very lovely, flowery, esoteric thing to say. I didn't really understand what it was he was trying to tell me. And I think he got it. It went right over my head. Well, 3 weeks later, we're interviewing this fiery Irish jazz singer at this remarkable place called the Dog Chapel in St. Johnsbury, Vermont, New England colonial chapter dedicated to the love of dogs and the memory of dogs who have passed. It's this beautiful place. More stories if you want to hear them. But we asked her, and Kathy said, love is a way of walking in the world. I thought, okay, kind of Buddhist monk moment. I kind of get that, but it sounds like a meme, something you put on your t-shirt. Sounds great. Well, 3 weeks later, we're interviewing Reverend Cromwell Handy, who's the current pastor at Martin Luther King's former church, the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. And we asked him that question, and he said, love is all of us all the time. And I thought, putting those dots together, I'm going to have a Tibetan Buddhist monk, an Irish jazz singer, and a Black Baptist minister all telling me basically the same thing about this. The basic principles of quantum physics are showing us scientifically that everything really is one thing. All matter, all energy, is basically information, and all that information is entangled and it exists everywhere at once. The double slit experiment, and I can tell you what that is if you're interested, shows us also that all of that information that exists everywhere all the time is also affected by the observer. Your energy affects the reality that you observe, and we can demonstrate that scientifically. So if everything is one thing, and that one thing is influenced by consciousness, there has to be an observer that identifies it, basically fixes all that stuff in its position and in space and time. There has to be an ultimate observer. There has to be some overriding thought that makes all this stuff that we call the universe possible. And now that we know through the work that we've done that love is part of consciousness and consciousness is the foundational principle of the universe, that means there is universal love. Anything that's conscious has that within it. We are all conscious entities. And so that love is something not that pops out of our head. And this is another thing that's related to that work. I had no idea before I started talking to people in neuroscience. We have no idea what consciousness is.
Right.
We don't know how it happens. I always thought, even as a science teacher, well, it pops out of your head somehow, right? This 3 pounds of gray matter in your head, it produces consciousness.
Or it's
But
attached
they have,
like from the amygdala to some kind of creative consciousness.
There's no
consciousness. That's what I thought.
Okay, right. Well, actually, you're on to what neuroscience is starting to show us, and especially when you combine it with the findings from quantum physics, it's far more likely that our brains, our bodies, this corporeal vehicle that we ride around in is a receiver of consciousness, not a producer of it. And so back to your original question, I know there's a long way to come back around to what's the unity of love. When we can get people through these stories to see that they're connected with one another, part of that word community is unity. When we start to find out that there is a unity between us, the rancher and the boat builder and the submarine captain all love their wives. That's a place where they've all connected. And then they start finding out that that unity of love is something that's not just between them, it's between them and all of the other conscious beings in the world.
I want to hone in on this idea that we're not like the purveyors or drivers of consciousness, or we are the receivers. And so how does so when I answered, I think when we talked last and I answered your question, like love is the first thing that came to me, which was not the thing that came to me today. So that's fascinating how I would answer the question differently in a different moment of time. But at that point in time, it was being. Love is being. So in other words, like whenever I'm being, like, because being means I'm present. And if in fact I'm a receiver of consciousness, and consciousness is universal love, and I don't know that I'm reframing and repeated whatever you said exactly the way you said it. Well, then like if I'm being, then I am love, and love is being. Now, where does hate come into the picture in that equation of the quantum physics, universal love, and consciousness?
That's interesting.
If we're receivers, there has to be something that intercepts, intervenes, pardon my French, but fucks up the whole system of transmission. If in fact I'm a receiver of universal love and consciousness, and I can buy that, that sounds okay to me. But then there's also this thing I call my personality, my being, my name, my corporeal sense of self. And I have negativity, and I have dark emotions. And so there is this sense that when I have negativity or dark emotions, that I am disconnected from either that place of being or universal love. And is that what it is? Or what is your take on that? Like the dark negative side? Or
I want to go back to the word that you used, because oftentimes people conflate, they think of love and hate as being diametrically opposed, as if they're even in the same sphere. They're not. Hate is not the opposite of love. In fact, hate is an emotion. And the reason you sense that emotion is because of your love. You know it's there because that's basically your love is the sensory organ that you're using, to perceive that. You understand what hate is because of the love that's in you. If you're looking for the opposite of love is not hate, it's lovelessness.
Or indifference.
Apathy. Indifference. So if you're looking for, the opposite of the presence of something is the absence of it. Right. So the difference is, you're talking you're talking apples and marbles. Right. Love and hate are completely different things, but we know what hate is because of the love that's in us. One of the other key understandings that we try to get across to people through this work is that love is not something that you can give. And it's not something that you can receive. It's not, it isn't, it's like, and this is the reason I correlate it with your senses. We can give people things to see, but we can't give them our sense of sight. Right. You can provide things that will awaken the love that's in someone, just like they can do for you. Right. But you can't give them your sense of love. You can tell somebody a joke, but you can't give them your sense of humor. When we love someone, we're not giving them our love, but they sense it, and it awakens something that's already within them. Right. Sometimes in our lives, we find that we're no longer receiving that. We're not giving we're not giving them our love, but we're not providing anything that awakens it within them anymore. And that doesn't mean that our love is diminished, and neither is theirs, but we're no longer, one of the things that I say in the book is, people, one of the common questions we get is, how do I know that love is there? How do I know it's real? And what you're really asking, boiling that question down, is, well, why do we love? Right. If we can identify what it is, and I think we've done a pretty good job of doing that, then you have to answer the question, well, why does it not happen, but why is it? Why do I love some of the things I love and other people? And really, when you look at it, the answer boils down to we love what grows us. We love what grows our love inside us. When we feel that, when we feel the compassion and the duty and the romance and all the different, the fondness, the cherishing that we have with our children, when we feel that stuff within us, it makes us bigger inside. When you can know that someone else is bigger inside because of something that happened to them, because of your relationship, that's love.
I want people to know more about their own intrinsic state of love. And what I want, I like these questions to you, and even the title of the podcast, Love is Blank, is about how do I get your perspective out to my listeners around love and the broadness of love and the consciousness of love and the beingness of love and anything else, which is really like my next question, that people don't quite understand. What is that thing in your mind? Is like, if you were to boil it down to one thing that people like misunderstand about love, I mean, other than that it's an emotion, besides that, like what is that one thing? Like almost when people, when you started this and you were talking about, people are like, well, what is it? How have you been married so long? What's your secret? There was that element of curiosity, because obviously people want to feel love and have love so bad, but there's still that curiosity, and like they don't know something that other people know.
What's your secret? Yeah.
Yeah. What is that?
Right. There really aren't any secrets. But if there's one sort of revelation that you can answer, that's that your love does not depend on anyone else. And that's why people are so frustrated and so anxious about they want to find love and they're looking out here. When if you realize, that it's part of what you are, it's part of who you are, it's part of the essential consciousness, it's the makeup of who and what all of us are. If you didn't have it, you wouldn't realize you lacked it, or you wouldn't feel like you lacked it anyway. So trying to get it from other people is like it's like trying to get the sense of sound from them. If you're having trouble hearing things, you're trying to get the sense of sound from someone else instead of trying to find ways to awaken it in yourself.
Right.
And so if there was one thing I could get across to people, it's that your love is not dependent on everyone else. What you're longing for is for them to awaken something that's already in you. And I totally understand that. But you also have an opportunity to wake it up in them. And when you do that, you make a connection that makes yours come alive as well. That's why, people that serve others are oftentimes the most fulfilled and the most loving, because they're constantly setting up that continual cycle, of giving and waking up the love that's in other people and then finding it radiating back to them.
Earlier in my life, when I was more consumed with like getting married or having a relationship, I would find myself finding comfort in being available for other people and mentoring people and just serving people by listening them. And I often heard it said in my communities, like, get out of yourself and go listen to somebody else. Get out of yourself and go help somebody. And that really cured a lot of this like deep darkness I had around like, I'm not going to find the one, I'm incomplete because I'm not with somebody or married or in a relationship. And now as I've gotten older, there's this somewhat completeness that I think is the thing that a lot of people are looking for or craving, which is the beingness of love. Like, I don't need a relationship to be in love. I am in love, and I am in love with a God, higher power, supernatural being, creative consciousness. I don't care what it's called. I'm in love with this idea that there's this great energy running in and around and through me. And it's not esoteric. It's quite practical. It's about making a connection with the next person I encounter, like having a conversation with the person next to me picking limes at the grocery store, or like anything, like even during COVID, every time I got out, even though we were like this, I was like, hi. I crave connection, because for me, connection and service are the greatest forms of love. And so, yes, there is this place where I do believe that the completeness of this, like everyone talks about like self-love, and you got to love yourself, and self-care. And in a lot of ways, I find them to be words that people don't quite understand, because the truth is, for me in my journey, self-care and self-love are about the other without being dependent on that other to produce the feeling that I get when I show up for that other as the love of myself.
Right.
So it's fascinating to think about that and even thinking about it now, there's that feeling in my body, talking about it,
Mhm.
of goosebumpy, warmth, love. What I feel like an
Right.
equate a feeling of love in my body, and I believe that is the cure all.
You and I are going to be in total agreement on the way that you describe that. And part of that is having the confidence of knowing, you're in touch with, that inner part of yourself where you're going, yeah, I totally get that. I know love is in here, and I know I sense the world around me with it. And I totally understand. You guys, we're going to be on the same page. But saying that to people that feel that loneliness and that disconnect, it can be an incredibly unsatisfying thing to hear,
Yeah,
because it's just not, it's so hard to come out of that dark place where you're going, I just feel, but what you're feeling is not lovelessness in the world around you.
right.
It's the lack of being acknowledged.
Mhm.
One of the keys to, that we're finding in this pervading sense of loneliness that we're encountering across the country is that people just feel so anonymous.
Yeah, yeah,
There's such power in being acknowledged, and oftentimes people that are looking for love, they think they're looking for love. What they're looking for, that love is already in them,
mm,
but it's so dormant because they just feel so unseen. So what they're after, what they're looking for isn't love. It's the acknowledgement of the love that's already in them.
yeah. It's a connection. It's being seen. It's being heard. It's like
Yeah.
whatever it is, and
I
there's
know I'm one of you. I need to hear it.
anybody in any stage of life or despair or happiness or at any
Mhm.
end spectrum of feelings or lifestyle, I can be tomorrow. Like
Well, that's
firmly.
Joseph Campbell said, every story you hear is your own story.
Oh, absolutely. And I say this all the time, which is that at any moment in my life with like one quick decision, I could have went either route, have been like, the next, like Saint Nicole or a child molester. And I know that sounds like a strong thing to say, but
No, you're
people's
right.
decisions and their life
Hmm.
experience is very powerful. And that feeling of not being seen and heard is really, I think, at the foundation of a lot of mental and emotional health issues that
Hmm.
eventually lead to things like homelessness and institutionalization. And, it's a devastating thing that also it gets perpetuated by, in some cases, people trying to help in ways that maybe don't help. And that's a hard thing because again,
Hmm.
like how you would help and how I would help might be two different things. So it's a phenomenally, that's an ongoing conversation for another day. But having said that, let's go ahead and give you a minute or two to talk about what's going on with your project. I will, let people know how to get in touch with you, through my post of the video and podcast.
Hmm.
But please, for the sake of anybody listening, tell them how to get in touch with you, what projects you're working on. If you want someone involved, tell them how to get involved and anything like that you want them to know.
Sure, I appreciate that. If you'd like to see more of our work, our website's easy. It's journeystolove.com. We've got an active YouTube channel, so you can see, many of the stories and the interviews and the people that we've encountered across the country. We also have our first book is in the hands of literary agents right now, so it's not currently available. But if you stay in touch with us on the website, you'll be able to see the book. It's called On a Map of Souls: The Quest for Love's True Story. And we also have just come across a major investor who was interested in putting some money behind the project. So we're looking at probably within the next 2 years. If everything goes well, we'll be in production for an independent film based on the book, based on the work too.
That's great. Great. So Journeys to Love.
And
Go
mhm.
ahead.
And we also have a Patreon if anybody wants to support the work. If you could just go to Patreon and type in Journeys to Love, you'll find us there.
Okay. I've never heard that site. Can you say that again?
Patreon?
Patreon. Okay. How do you
Yeah.
spell
Patreon.
Okay, never heard that. It's like, is it
Yeah,
like
it's
GoFundMe?
well, it's like crowdfunding, but it's for people that want to pay, they want to basically be patrons of
Got it.
they're artists and filmmakers and music makers and all kinds of creatives that are there, and for $1 a month or $5 a month, you can support the projects. We're kind of stupid about it. We support way too many people because every time we're on, we go, oh, I want to give that guy $1, and
Oh,
so
yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
They're doing
But
what they
it's
told
yeah.
you're giving it away to keep it.
Oh yeah. Well, because like you said, like we talked about, every story you hear is your own story, and I'm a sucker for a good story, and I don't mind supporting them.
I know. That's great. All right, Scott. So, and then I am once again Nicole Devlin, and I talk about power. I do power coaching. Most of the focus of my coaching is on either individuals in job transition or looking for a different vocation or something more deep, meaningful, and loving in their work. I support some of those people as they trudge the road towards entrepreneurship and small business through coaching and operations and administration work. I have this podcast, and I also have a course that helps administrative people to support small businesses. So you can get in touch with me through my website, NicoleDevlin.com, or my email is nicole@nicoledevlin.com. Thanks again for joining me for today's podcast, and we'll see you soon.